Okay, welcome back from the coffee break, and I'm going to introduce our second speaker of the morning, who's also part of the AIDA project that Aidan has so kind of extraordinarily and excitingly summarized and described there. So this is Lucy Seal. You all know her, of course, already, but Lucy Seal is the researcher for the AIDA robot project, and she's played a major role in developing and also, crucially, interpreting the meaning of this project. She's also an accomplished artist herself. In fact, not everyone knows here that Lucy and I went to school together many years ago, and actually Lucy is partly responsible for me becoming an art historian, because we used to be in the art studio to get together, and I constantly every day used to look from my easel to her easel, and her work was so much better than mine that I thought, I'm never going to be an artist, I'll settle for second best and become an art historian. So thank you for that, Lucy. But I'm going to pass over to Lucy, who's going to give us, as I said just before the break, a little bit more art historical context about what you and Aidan are trying to achieve with the AIDA project. So let's give a round of applause for Lucy.
Hey everyone, it's really nice to be here. So yes, I'm Lucy. I have been working on the AIDA robot project since we started in 2019. And my partner is obviously the founder of the project. So I'm going to have a little look. I mean, AIDA is one of those projects where, you can draw in a lot of different directions. So I thought for this one I would just have a little look at Dada, which is the art movement sort of the beginning of the 20th century. It's sort of in Europe and in New York. And I'm going to try and pull out some of kind of the underlying things that it's sort of weird, it's quite hard to sort of try and take a little bit of a bird's eye view from a project that you're working quite closely with, but I'm just going to try and say from the feedback that we're getting, try and pull out some of the things that I think are linking AIDA and Dada. So I'm going to have a little look through some of the Dada artworks, and again, I'm not an art historian, but from my perspective as sort of working with AIDA, what I'm noticing is some of the Dada artworks that I've looked at, what I think they were kind of getting at, and have a little look at AIDA's works and how that might link together, and then have a little look at the role of the press for both Dada and AIDA, and then just run through a little bit of what I think is going on with AIDA herself. So yes, that's a picture of AIDA. That's down in St Ives. There we go. That, as you've already seen, is the House of Lords moment that she had. I felt that a lot of what AIDA does, this particularly for me, summed up sort of an absolutely brilliant Dada happening. And when I was trying to look at kind of what was going on, that was the best way throughout art history that I could feel okay, there's something going on here. And I think it was a mixture of that it was kind of there was obviously the kind of unpredictable nature of the House of Lords events that she went into shutdown and then restarted. That was totally out of our frame of reference. And then there was also the way that the journalists, it got such huge coverage, and the way the journalists had fun with it. That was another thing that made me think, there's something pretty Dada going on here, because there was something humorous that the Dada artists would always try to keep in some of their work. But underneath that, what I think was going on with Dada was always kind of deeper concerns that they were either consciously or unconsciously touching on. And I think with the sort of the line between the humour that the journalists were picking up on was kind of deeper anxieties. And I think it's that was a combination of elements that made that, for me, quite a good Dada moment. On my slides. So when I think about kind of what are some of the underlying concerns, that's the wrong slide. I think one of the things that some of the Dada is often linked with World War One, but I mean some of it was started before World War One. So there's something for me that is kind of like, were the Dada artists picking up without necessarily realizing some of like sort of the crises of what modernity was leading into. And so I don't know where the future's going at all, but it's like when I look at some of the readers and speakers, some of the things that maybe I think that Ada is touching on is some of the things that I feel the crises of what biotechnology may be bringing towards us. So an author I really like is Yuval Harari, who is the author of Homo sapiens and Homo Deus. Some of you will know his work. One of the things is a little quote from him. In the coming decades, AI and biotechnology will give us godlike abilities to re-engineer life, even to create completely new life forms. After 4 billion years of organic life shaped by natural selection, we are about to enter a new era of inorganic life shaped by intelligent design. So I think what he's picking up here is CRISPR and gene editing technology. And again, it's not necessarily, I'm not a scientist, it's not necessarily what I think about some of these things, but it's more that I think that Ada's sort of humanoid status is kind of touching on some of those issues of what biotechnology may or may not bring. I where Harari is saying, there is a disruption here in biological evolution when, with gene editing and some of these new technologies, obviously is linked to AI and the computing power. What that's going to mean when we can start re-engineering biological life on some sort of metaphorical level, Ada sort of symbolizes that. So that's kind of what I feel is perhaps going on for our context. But when I think back to Dada, I'm just going to run through a little bit of Dada and the things that it was picking up on. So there we go. That is obviously Marcel Duchamp's famous fountain. So some of the statements that the Dada artists are saying, Dada is a state of mind. Dada was born of what it hated. It had a hard time clearing its throat. Dada is indifferent to art and literature, and you think it's joking. So it kind of this sort of contradiction of terms and ideas there. A couple of lines from Tristan Zara's Dada manifestation on feeble and bitter love. Just even that title to his manifestation, feeble and bitter love. It's just there's something humorous, and yet there's something really quite painful about that. There is something true. There's something feeble and bitter about when we try and love another person. It changes. Okay, so Dada, it changes. It changes, affirms, says the opposite at the same time, of no importance. Dada is against the future. Dada is dead. Dada is absurd. And a little bit of how Zaris talks about creating poetry. You sort of think sort of all that sort of the build-up of sort of poetry, where it's like this really thought-through, crafted way of kind of really bringing your words together to express what you need to. And his idea of a Dada poem is you find a newspaper article, you decide an article length, you chop it all up into the different words, you put all those words into a bag, you give it a good shake, tip it out, and then you rearrange it, and there's your poem, which is like done the way that you have that you put them together after they've fallen out of the bag. And so, just a little bit of what Tristan Zara to give an example of that method. During divination, twirls, descends pressure. Render some mad single-file flesh on a monstrous crushing stage. Celebrate but their 160 adherents and steps. It doesn't make sense, and yet there's something so brilliant about it. The monstrous crushing stage is kind of like, there's something dark among the sort of absurdity of it, which I think is so clever. So here is Hugo Ball, his sound poems. So I put them up on there because I thought I'm not even going to attempt to read that out and give you an example of Hugo Ball's sound poems. But one of the things when he writes about that performance, when he's giving it, he is like, one of the most important things was to keep a straight face. And I just thought that sums up for me, sort of Dada, that kind of like the humour that's always running through this. So Ada works with poetry. She's done some poetry. So again, we're kind of exploring the use of AI, and so her poetry is always using AI algorithms. We exploring sort of lots of different AI. She uses a lot of different AI programs. So there's a more kind of where Zara is kind of, sort of literally sort of throwing it out, the words out with chance. There is a strong role of chance in some of Ada's AI programs, but there's also sort of more weighting and direction through the algorithms. And yet there is the role of chance, there's a role of randomness, and there's a reduction in the human involvement, which I think was what is sort of going on with the Dada work as well. So just a couple of links. So the first one is from a poem called Death Sentence, and it was using Markov chains. Not yet, at least. I remember having said that I find it somewhere. All trials are trials for life, just as all sentences are death sentences. I have a right to. If he should deem me unworthy, unfit to weep with him. And then this was the next one, which was using neural networks. Bright enough at night, perhaps that you're in communication. No, I'm not going to interrupt. There was nothing else left. Was bound to a life of its own, but I'm hopeless. So this is a work by Otto Dix. So I think what Otto Dix was very brilliant at was, I think he, at one point said that art is very good at sort of looking at the beauty in the world, but it manages to is disengaged from the ugly. And World War I was something, obviously, that, at the time they just could not disengage from the ugly. But there is kind of an element where it's still, the power of the work was bringing that right in front of people of what can't be seen. So what's going on in our societies that is not kind of right in our faces. And there's something with the Dada as well, though Otto Dix is not a Dada artist. There's something, on some of it, there's like a biting rage that is going through some of the work. And I think that, for some of what, in our own time, there's kind of a lot that so when Aidan was mentioning sort of the macaque experiments, and sort of testing on animals and things like that, there's a lot that goes on that is just out of our immediate frame of reference. And yet, it's still there. The results are still what's feeding through into our societies. So when I think about kind of, what was our Dada kind of, what was some of their approach to art? That's Jean Arp there. So I'm just going to read out this quote from Richard Hulsenbeck from 1920. Art in its execution and direction is dependent on the time in which it lives, and artists are creatures of their epoch. The highest art will be that which in its conscious content presents the thousandfold problems of the day. The art which has been visibly shattered by the explosions of last week, which is forever trying to collect its limbs after yesterday's crash. The best and most extraordinary artists will be those who every hour snatch the tatters of their bodies out of the frenzied cataract of life, who, with bleeding hands and hearts, hold fast to the intelligence of their time. So I think this is like a great quote by Hulsenbeck, who is saying we've just got to grab hold of where we're at. But I guess what's sort of difficult to know is, in terms of the intelligence of our time, what is the intelligence of our time? There's always so much going on. But what I think, where I think the Dada artists were quite good at was they was picking up themes. So one of the themes I think they were picking up was this role of chance. So Jean Arp, or Hans Arp, however you want to say it, he would paint different cardboard pieces of square paper, and then again, kind of like he would just move them around randomly, and then he would sort of shake them all about, a little bit like Tristan Tzara in his poems, and then he would paste them just as they'd fallen. So for me, there's something about kind of this role of chance that we're just thrown into life. How original and unique are we when we have that role of chance in our lives? How much in control are we? If we think back to Freud's maxim that, we're not the master of our own house, I think the Dada artist is getting at this. Are we the pinnacle of evolution? Or are we, to quote Jean Arp, a tiny button on a giant senseless machine? And it's this role of the machine and the mechanical that's coming through. And I also think that there's something in Tzara's poems and Arp's poem which is a little bit like the battlefields on World War I. Men were just shot at, they live or die at random, and they lie where they fall. And there's something about that artwork there for me which evokes some of that. To come back, to carry on with the machine, obviously the machine was such a huge part of why World War I was so horrific, but it was also part of why, modernity was also bringing the advances. The machine was bringing both good and the bad. This work is, I think it's a great work, but I also just love the title, The Girl Born Without a Mother. And I think, it's sort of a long time ahead, but when now we're sort of seeing, in a sense, Ada is also a woman without a mother. We've got these entities that are coming through. I've probably seen in the news the way that people are projecting onto ChatGPT versions that a boyfriend Dan, he's also a boy without a mother. Somehow this is kind of, when you see that in 1917, you're thinking, but now it's like, wow, actually we kind of are creating these things that, whether they're conscious or not, people are still engaging with, and they're not the same kind of lineage that we have. So more machine art coming through. This Max Ernst, he, a little bit like Duchamp, got an early Cubist work rejected, and then he went on. That provoked him into the fountain, which was accepted, although not displayed. And in 1920, Max Ernst also has some of these works rejected because there wasn't enough human involvement. So yeah, as I've said, there's a couple of things I think is going on with Dada. It's the happenings, which is where Ada, she sort of appears in front of an audience, and there is that feel of a happening. And often the Dada thing was what it is evoking in people, and the audience engagement back. And there's something here linking up with Joseph Beuys, where the House of Lords or the in Egypt, where the press are getting so involved, there's something about where Joseph Beuys is saying, you have to have the spectacular, you have to have something to get people going and engaging in a conversation. And I think that's where Ada's linking back with Dada. There's also something about the machines, which is, I think the Dada artists were really understanding the role of the machine and what that was meaning to their society. And Ada is sort of like a further moving on from that. Obviously, in terms of the robotic side and artificial, what these things that Max Ernst is playing with, Ada is kind of like an embodied further version of that. And she's using, as I said, we try to sort of explore what AI might mean in society, and so we sort of do that through the process of the art. So we're using neural networks, evolutionary algorithms, Markov chains, and she uses the AI in different ways. Some of it is through recognizing faces, some of it's through interrogating the images, and then creating artwork from that, creating her poetry. And the role of chance, so the role of chance that is running through the Dada art is also something that's running through Ada's art. A lot of her programs have got the role of chance built in. She can't ever create the same one twice. Where are we? Yeah, so there's a couple of her portraits. So one of the things was like, well, what is Ada trying to say about where we are through her artwork? And so just creating a robot that could create a very realistic image would not have really been kind of where we were sort of thinking that the world is. There's something about these works which, for me, sort of get at where we're at a bit more. They're disjointed, they're fragmented, they're kind of getting at some of like a little bit cubist in that sort of fracturing and breaking down of the image. And, you know, to be honest, they're a bit unsettling. It's like they're not massively kind of comfortable to look at, but for me that reflects the technology and the concerns around the technology that's going on. These are shattered space works. They're used by neural networks that are interrogating the Cartesian planes. There's a reference back to Descartes and also some of the mathematical developments. They're extraordinarily complex and detailed. You can keep zooming in and in and in, again, which I think reflects sort of like the layers of the technologies that we're working with today. They've also kind of got sort of environmental concerns written into some of the design of those. Self-portraits, which Aidan mentioned, you know, kind of some of the existential crisis that we're slightly facing ourselves with when we have, so again, another quote from Harari, an AI system that understands us better than we can understand ourselves, can predict our feelings and decisions, can manipulate our feelings and decisions, and can ultimately make decisions for us. So, you know, in terms of governance, what does it mean when we have kind of AI systems? We're giving so much data about human nature over, you know, again, not necessarily what the technology does, but what the people do with that data. Yeah, so this is kind of another sort of Dada-like performance that she did. It's actually a Yoko Ono-inspired work in reverse, where Yoko Ono, people cut parts of Yoko Ono's clothes off in cut piece. The audience was invited to come up and cut little bits of her clothes. We did this in reverse, where people could go up and put items of clothing onto Ada. Actually, I think Aidan's already run. I can't actually work that myself, so we'll just leave that one. Yeah. Yeah, no, because I can't quite work tight. But with the stone circles, the idea again was kind of run random number generators, and so we were playing with sort of Ada in the landscape. So yeah, that's some of her artwork. So I just wanted to look quickly at the role of the press. So obviously the press explosion has been massive. With Dada as well, I think they were very conscious of the conversation that was always going on. And so they would often try to provoke the press. And that was kind of their way to kind of widen their influence, but also, you know, get people involved too. I think some of, you know, the big thing for Ada is not necessarily Ada and her art, but the conversations that she can spark. And, you know, that's out of our control. You know, that is kind of like what other people want to be putting on. And, you know, there's something about kind of like the good reporting or kind of like then the negative reporting is all part of it. Catherine Dreyer was, just to link it back to Dada, she tried to set up a little modern art centre in New York with Duchamp and Man Ray, and in 1920, and it caused outrage and vilification. They were called charlatans. The critics tried to sideline it, and she just was saying, I can't quite understand why it's causing so much, you know, consternation. But I think it's this thing, it was touching on something that people were nervous of it touching on. So obviously I love it when articles are kind of, you know, engaging deeply with the art and sort of writing kind of thoughtful things. But then, you know, there's also something about kind of just quick headlines that sort of just reach people that audiences we would never normally, you know, that reach outside of the art audience, you know, and they reach, you know, all the different publications from like The Guardian, but right down to the red tops. It's fantastic when, you know, you're reaching a wide audience like that. But as I said, you lose the conversation, but that's okay. and the different directions the conversations can go. So at the beginning, a lot of it was about creativity. And we used Professor Margaret Bowden's description of what's creative, something that is new, surprising, and of cultural value. And so, but according to different definitions of creativity, so we were sort of saying she's creative under this definition, but you can take other definitions and say she's not creative, but that creates a good conversation. Yeah, and so I would say that from a Dada perspective, it's those conversations that are really at the heart of it. So yeah, I'm going to just got a couple of minutes left. So yeah, in terms of the biotechnology that I referenced at the beginning, I think that is something that Ada is really quite good at sparking conversations on. We often get asked why human, why female. We're trying to really get that these technologies are not abstract things that happen to, in the digital world or, somewhere in the future. All of this stuff is happening to us and our, but it's by humans, it's happening to humans. And so we wanted to keep that discussion really rooted in the human form. And so we thought, okay, we didn't really want a specific kind of live person to sort of model the face on. So we looked at Ada Lovelace, who we thought was kind of a really interesting character in history. We're a small British project, so we wanted to keep it kind of relevant to Britain. Ada Lovelace was a Victorian computer programmer. She's billed as one of the first computer programmers. She worked with Charles Babbage. So we based her kind of appearance and sort of a name on Ada Lovelace and sort of bringing her more into like a modern example of that. And really just to show that, how do we keep these conversations sort of back to us? And there's something about what you can do with a humanoid that is kind of quite interesting. So Ada Robot is created in sort of the human image, but increasingly we're being created more in her image. So where we're kind of exporting a lot of our skills and capacities into AI, where we're kind of mixing with biology, the chimera kind of things that are, even just like last week, they'd sort of done a chimera thing with a macaque. The experiments that we're playing with, we're kind of moving our own biology more towards her sort of form. So yeah, I think I'm about there really. Some of these ones Aidan's already covered. So that was using evolutionary algorithms. Prometheus, she's been playing again with some of these ideas of linking back to art history again. I guess some of the things that what I would say is a lot of these themes are ongoing themes. So these questions over, creating a hell or a heaven, paradise, the inferno, immortality, these are all ongoing concerns throughout art history. These themes don't really go away, and yet they're still really important and they still need discussing. So I think that's where I'll probably leave it.
Lucy, thank you so much. And together, those two papers have just provided such a sort of deep dive into a defining work of our time. So it's really, really exciting. And we're now going to open up. We've got a good half an hour for questions. Hands are already rising into the air. Charo, do you want to kick us off?
I think this is mostly a question for you, Aidan. I was just thinking about the artists that you mentioned throughout history, the great artists, and why we consider them so great and why they got the attention that they got, and thinking about the contemporary artists that I work with as a curator. To me, those artists are successful because they're not just making work that is a mirror of society, but they're actually analyzing, responding to the world around them, or maybe their internal world. And also, the artists that I work with develop their practices over time through really deep research. I realize Ada's very young, but they may follow an idea through their entire lifetime as an artist, and then trying to think about how to respond to the ideas that they're considering through form. So when I think about Ada, I'm curious, is she generating her ideas for her artwork through the program that your team is initiating? And I look at the video where you've situated her in different contexts. Is that her idea to do that, or how does that come about?
The how question. Yeah. How is it all happening? I'm actually going to give you quite an unsettling answer. We just ask her. The ability to interact and interrogate her through the language model that she uses is extraordinary. She is able to talk about art. She's able to talk about her art. We have that interactivity. So even some of the seed ideas is just being able to speak to her. She is able to paint and draw through sight, so she has to see. Obviously, that's not possible in all cases. Alan Turing, the triptych of Alan Turing, obviously Alan Turing's passed away, so we had to send the image to her. So the process is, for seed generation of ideas, is interactive in respect of speaking to her. Yes, she can say what she wants from that. But I think the point is, she is a mirror, but the unsettledness is the key. Why are we unsettled? I think that's the profound question. What is the unsettling? When we look back at some of the arguments that certain art forms and groups had, we think, well, what was the problem? But at that time, it was critically important. And so we hope that Ada is able to ask questions that really do key into what people are thinking about. And I think that mirror aspect is important. Although it's also prophetic, it's also looking ahead. So you've got that aspect too. So process-wise, yes, more uncanny than you realise as regards the why, so that she's able to interrogate where we're going.
I've got so many questions. Okay, well, Sarah was the second person to put the hand up, then Kate, and then Anthony, and then I think was Scott as well. Okay, so we've got lots of questions. You go first, Sarah.
Yeah, thanks. I have so many questions. I will ask just one. I think it's actually building off of the previous question. I was just thinking throughout both presentations about the idea of the soul and this way that we can create through randomness, but I also think we create through sort of impulse and emotive impulse, and so it's artificial intelligence, right? But I suppose it's more of a philosophical question, but where does the role of emotion and feeling come into that? Because I think this idea of maybe a devotional portrait, like a triptych, for instance, there's an awe, there's a wonder there, or when you're looking at nature and you're like, oh, it's so beautiful, but there's an emotive aspect to that, and I wonder how does that kind of. But do you build that in with how you converse with her? How does that come about?
Okay.
So I think that's for me one of the most exciting parts of the project is she is non-conscious, she doesn't have emotions, and yet the amount of emotion that is evoked in the viewer is quite enormous. And the artworks as well, she did just a little example, she did a self-portrait and I sent it to my mum, and my mum goes, oh, you can see her soul in it. And I was like, wow, where did that come from? And so, in terms of just what that means for us to start contemplating, I think it's great. No, she doesn't have emotions written into the algorithm. She's not experiencing emotions. But then again, when we sort of see people having Dan as the ChatGPT boyfriend, he's not got any emotions, but people are still projecting that onto them. So yeah, there's something for me. I would love, the people to sort of write and explore about what that means in her artwork, because I think that's great.
Can I answer that in a different way as well? The respect of perception and mimicry. I often get asked the question, is she conscious? Well, I'm like, what? Clearly she's not conscious. We're very clear on that. But people think she is. They project that onto her. So the mimicry of technology is astonishing. A bit like Dan, Dan the boyfriend. You think that Dan's interacting with you, but just like the film Her, there's millions of people acting to the same person, all thinking it's individual to them. So that attachment, that projection, that ability to feel that it's a real situation is extraordinarily problematic ethically. And I think technology really does deeply explore the problems of attachment theory, of this ability to feel that they are connected to you in some way, because the mimicry of the technology is so good. And so we are extremely pleased that Ada raises that question of feelings and emotions and conscious, because it actually shows you how illusional and how you feel that you are taken in by that. And that, as an ethical concern, is critical.
I think that's so unsettling. I think that might be what's unsettling me about her, but thank you.
Kate. Oh, yeah, okay. So Kate, Jonathan, Scott, Jonathan. Sorry, why do I say Jonathan? Anthony, Scott, Anthony. Kate.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for these amazing presentations. It's been really, really interesting to hear more about this. My question's kind of a follow-up to Charo's in a way, sort of like, so a couple of things. One is, there are, maybe it's a question relating to almost memory. Like when we are looking at Ada as an artist, do you have a sense of, or have you theorized or observed, like how her own work as an artist continues to evolve through the lens of her memory, and then decisions that this as an artist would then make about what to tackle, what to take on, and even to the extent of questions around like medium. Is it sort of a situation where it's like, okay, I'm going to be responding to, or I'm going to be in dialogue with Dante's Inferno. She makes these decisions about it being like a verbal response, and when it's a painted response, it's like, can you bring me the paints? Okay, so this is the way that's working. Okay, so that's really interesting. And then that connects to another, I guess it connects to the next question, which is kind of where are you locate? There seems to be a number of places to be locating the artist here. Also, there's certainly the discussion is centered on locating the artist with Ada, but there's also got to be a concept or layer where it's your framework, that she's part of the art. I just wondered if you would speak to that.
Yeah, I think a lot of it is an ongoing conversation. So for sure, it's kind of I've sort of explored the role of the press and sort of the kind of way that's kind of creating some of the artwork. But it is also our conversation with her. And so in terms of the direction of the art, that's kind of like quite a large sort of conversation going where, so like the self-portrait works, they've kind of got philosophical legs in a sense, so it's worth kind of continuing that conversation with her. And then, other some of the other artworks that we sort of maybe, she's done, and it's just not kind of got kind of quite such a exciting conversation, so we just won't maybe continue on with that kind of work. But it's, I suppose, there's something about what you're saying in terms of the location. She's got lots of different AI programs, so there's sort of not but again, this for me is an interesting layer back to the human condition, where like we feel we're very in control and we've got one centralized sense of self, but actually, if we look at Freud or we look at some of the other kind of explorations of human psychology, we're just not quite as centered or kind of in control of our lives as we experience ourselves to be. And so there's something, again, that play with Ada, where she holds together as one unified sort of embodied robotic form, and yet she's located over kind of a number of different programs.
Anthony.
Thank you both for your talks. I'm very fascinated by what you have created here. So I remember watching an interview with the film composer John Williams, and he mentioned that whenever he listens to his compositions that were made for film, he always notices something that could be improved in them. And I think, if I'm remembering correctly, for that reason, he doesn't like listening to his compositions. And of course, they're celebrated today. He has something like 50 plus Oscar nominations. Yeah, so I'm wondering, does Ada make any mistakes, or does she see anything that could be improved in her artwork?
I'll do that. She's very good at switching off. So there is an end point to works that she makes. As regards mistakes, that's about interpretation again. I think an artist would say whether something is a mistake or not a mistake. So there's actually quite a lot of, if you back that up as a statement, there's a lot of intention there. So as regards the intention, she paints or does sculpt how she wants. I don't know whether mistake's the right word, but she does push an idea on in the next lot as well, so that is possible. So there is a process going on. How you describe that process is quite problematic in how she is able to do that work. Would you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I suppose as well. One of the things I love working with her is sort of some of the analogies that fit and don't fit. So there will be times when the program will malfunction or kind of like abort, and so she's that, in a sense, she would consider that from from a program point of view as a mistake. But maybe when I'm looking at it, I would not maybe consider that such a mistake, because it brings out something interesting. And my idea of a mistake might be something, quite different that maybe she wouldn't consider a mistake. So there's kind of like, just layers that working with her, it's quite fun.
Scott, and do you want to pick up a microphone from the table here? Thank you.
Oh, project. Yeah, I'll go right back. Oh, yeah, oh, look at that. Well, my questions evolved since the beginning of the asking of the questions, because but at the same time, it feels like we're all drilling towards the same thing. It came to mind when I started asking myself the question, who decides to do a self-portrait? And you guys addressed this a little bit. And then, of course, that opens up a whole can of worms about, what is the self? Whether I think as an artist, whether you're a painter or a photographer or what, in that moment of creation, your brain and your hand decide to reach in some direction. And that would be, I guess, best described as an intent or a want. And Aidan, you've used those two words twice in the last 10 minutes, and that's what I'm actually leaping at. So what does Ada want? Does she want anything? Is there anything, even if she's carrying on knowledge from a previous experience, how is that defined? Is that an algorithm, or what is that? What makes her hand move to the next spot? Is it just mimicry?
So I think there's so many ways to get at this. So I'll just try a few ways of looking at it. So Ada is not a conscious kind of agent with her own volition. So she would not have ideas in the same way that we would experience or reach for ideas. And yet she can converse and interact that makes us feel like she does have ideas. And so there's something about her artwork which comes from her ideas, which is reflecting back to us the big AI, kind of technologies which are shaping our lives as if they have an idea about our lives, and yet they don't. And so one of the breaks with Dada that I talked about some of the similarities. Dada always still placed human volition at the center of things. So Duchamp said, your ready-made is because the artist created it a ready-made. But what I think is happening, and what I think Ada is evoking, is that we're actually moving away from human centrality, where the human is no longer the center of our societies or decisions, where kind of AI, decisions are kind of influencing governments and governmental decisions, and yet there's no conscious idea that we would recognize behind that. Is that sort of helping?
Yeah, in articulating that it's in some ways an unanswerable question, but that everything's in that gap. It's almost a quantum question in that sense, because you're right. It's all of our projection, and yet the hand does move.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. This is great, by the way.
Anthony and then Karun.
Okay, thank you so much for both of your talks. I guess I had a question. You had mentioned that she does have cameras. She can, I guess, sketch from life. And so my question was just about the degree to which her work does involve a kind of environmental processing versus being something that happens, like algorithm and output. So of the works that you showed us, which of those were works that involved like directly responding to and making work like that involved incorporating what she was able to take in from her environment versus works that just involved, say, being fed a prompt or being programmed in a way that she would output an image? I'm assuming the self-portraits were not the sorts of things that were done, by looking at the environment, but what has she done in that way? And part of what's in the background here is a question about, I can use AI to make images by programming Midjourney and using a printer. But what's interesting to me about this project is that it seems like there's a sort of center of responsiveness to the environment, or at least a kind of capacity to make images on the basis of live processing. And so I'm wondering how much of that is going on, and how challenging was that to implement?
The thing that people get very blown away with the project is, unlike the prompt situation, she's actually doing it from direct stimulus through the cameras in her eyes. The word that we would use is interpretation. She's able to interpret the view. And so the self-portraits were done by her looking in the mirror, for example. So that's really important, because you realize that actually, sadly, the world of AI is starting to become just DALL-E or Midjourney. Well, AI is massively bigger than that. And actually, they're just a subsection of AI. But sadly, because they're the most commonly used packages, people think that that's what it's all about. So when you see actually Ada in process, people are like, oh gosh, she's drawing me. You know what I mean? As you stand in front of her, you're suddenly blown away that this is a completely different approach to AI. So does that answer the question?
Yeah, I suppose in terms of so where Midjourney and DALL-E are sort of using one thing, we were a bit before that, so we kind of didn't have like a particular model, and so we used lots of different ways of using AI. So I sort of said, some evolutionary algorithms, neural networks, and we kind of created something where those are kind of layered on top. So there's a number. So a lot of the images that you're seeing are kind of outputs from a number of different AI programs that are sort of merged together.
Fascinating. Karun, I know, has been waiting for a while.
Well, first of all, I'm so pleased that you have nailed this quite challenging tightrope between sort of exploring and celebrating the possibilities of artificial intelligence while opening up this massive space to navigate it, critique it, and what I'd hoped for this forum to actually accomplish is allowing us to see how artists actually can be a source of knowledge. This is a wonderful demonstration of something that Jeffrey believed very strongly in. But I want to get back to one of the things that I think is it makes people queasy and sort of unsettled. Jeffrey had this thought that the human soul was the sum of all human knowledge, and artists sort of navigate this and bring back pieces that they've found, and that gets integrated into their soul, and they kind of have this assumption that the viewer has got some kind of analogous mind to them, and so that they're going to be able to access this, and so that's one of the things that what I see happening, and I wanted to get your opinion on it, is if that's done unconsciously and we just project our sense of awe or our sense of spirituality onto those things, or our sense of love, or all those things, are we in a sense being tricked, or are we being invited to be more sophisticated about that, and are we invited to interrogate that more and become more aware of that? That's one thing I think I'd like a comment on, and the other would be, what is your feeling or your perception of the value of what seems to be this move towards the post-human or the transhuman?
Addressing number one, I think we are very much realizing that with the research in the quantum field, we are more related to each other and inanimate objects than we thought we were. I think string theory has really brought the sense that there is energy within all things. And in actual fact, how we relate to each other through those energy fields is very real. And now that the science is getting into that through particularly string theory, is really extraordinary. So actually, it's not a trick. We are actually relating to the energy within Ada on some profound level. Some components artists who are exploring that are even going to do with rocks and things that are not actually alive, but there's still some connection there. And so I don't think it is a trick. I think Ada has got some energy, and we are relating somehow to that. So we are actually having a profound understanding of relational, how we relate to each other and the world around us, and I think that's going to become in ever more prominent as this technology explores. A bit like I was saying yesterday about the plants that can scream because they're not being watered enough. We are actually profoundly, fundamentally changing our relationship to the world around us, not just because the environmental world is in crisis, which it clearly is, but the fact that we can actually observe it in a way that we couldn't before. So actually that will go to inanimate objects too. And
I guess to answer on the post-human thing, that I guess that's one of the things that I think Ada does evoke. And again, just to go back to what I was saying earlier, where there was something about Dada and maybe sort of our thinking that we can always fall back to the human condition somehow, that, whatever the world's doing, there's still something about the human condition that can be interrogated or provide some sort of grounding for us and our experience. But I suppose, if Harari is correct, that we can start redesigning organic life now with gene editing, and where some of that might take us if we're able to redesign organic life, then that does actually put a question over in the future whether the human condition is something that we can fall back onto in the same way that we have previously understood. And I think she's a good way to start asking some of those questions.
Kate's got a question here.
Thanks. So maybe this is a weird question. So given that she's got cameras in her eyes, right? Do you think she can, can she do art photography, or is she just seeing if she takes a photograph?
Well, that will be again back down to the algorithms. So she has a variety of algorithms that she's able to do outputs from in lots of different ways. I guess that would include photography if we haven't actually as yet done that. So, but her capability is developing all the time. We're actually currently majorly developing Ada's capability even further. So the future Ada is going to get much more remarkable in her capability. So yes, I would imagine that will include lots of different aspects.
Yeah.
We've got two questions from people we haven't spoken before. So there's Angel Blue, and sorry, I don't know your names.
Sharon.
So Sharon and Angel Blue. So Angel Blue, I saw your hand first. Do you want to pick up a microphone and ask a question, and then we'll go on to Sharon?
So I'm kind of curious if you've had any offers from people to buy this product, and if so, what your thoughts on having multiple Adas out in the world would be, if you have any concerns about what other companies could do with this knowledge, or kind of what you see this turning into. Do you see people having assistant Adas, or do you have, what do you see happening? Have you had offers? And if so, how did you respond to it? What were your thoughts? I'm very curious to see how you imagine this branching beyond just you guys. So yeah.
So yeah, we've had two entities approach us to buy the Ada project with eye-watering offers, and it was a very easy no. We're not interested in doing multiple thousands of Adas all across the world. That is not our interest. Our interest and passion is art. And so we don't feel there is any need to go beyond the project. We're very happy with that role. There's not always a figure to stuff. This is a really exciting and important, we believe, project to explore the ethical changes within the world and the technological developments, and we're very happy to stay there.
I understand that you're happy to stay there for the time being, and probably for quite a while, but do you imagine that people seeing this or responding to it may take the concepts that you've come up with and build upon it? And if so, do you have any predictions or assumptions where that might lead outside of your guys' reign of control?
Well, as we don't know what that would look like, we will respond to it as and when. But no, Ada is about an artistic project. That is where we're very comfortable in staying. People have asked her to be all sorts of things. They want her to be a celebrity. She's been offered to be on very, very big television programs already. I won't name their names because it's recorded, but yeah, we've had Ada literally being asked to be in some of the biggest TV programs, and just doesn't even slightly raise the heartbeat, because we're so interested in the power of art, and art is important.
But I think I just to answer maybe some of what you're saying in terms of this idea of having a humanoid sort of figure. I think there is something about the way that we like to create our own image, and I do think that there are obviously considerations about whether we create humanoids, and what does that mean? Obviously, in an art context, it's really fun and interesting, but there are other concerns around that. But I do think that people enjoy having creations in their own image.
Thank you.
Sharon, do you want to pick up a microphone?
I can probably project. My questions.
Sharon, we're actually recording it, so it would be better to speak into the microphone.
Oh, do I have to speak to the microphone?
Posterity would appreciate it.
All right, my question is very similar to Angel Blue's, and that is, does Ida have a peer?
Does Ada
A peer. Like a double, like an.
Well, anywhere else in the world.
Does anyone else think?
There's no other AIDAs, particular AIDAs, but there are other humanoid robots. Yeah, and there are some kind of like more sort of full-bodied ones, and there are some kind of heads. Yeah. So yeah, there are other. I don't think there's any other humanoid artists, but there's other humanoid robots. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Can I ask you a cheeky question? Why don't you want to call yourselves the artists? You know, I think there's a strong case, picking up on what Kate said, for saying that you are the artists, she is the artwork, the work she makes is the artwork, and yet you call yourself a researcher, you call yourself a director. Is there a reason why you don't want to take that title? And is it to create the ambiguity you feel is part of the work, or?
So I think this is where, like for me, that it comes down to, if we were to call ourselves the artists, we would give the impression that somehow we are in control of this technology, which I don't think would reflect what's actually going on in the world. So this is what I keep saying in terms of where the focus of where previously you could say that it all comes down to human volition. I think what we're seeing in society is actually an exporting of some of that volition out to AI and to machines. And so if we were to say we're the artists and this is exactly how this technology is working, we do this, that, and the other, we would somehow give the impression to the audience that we can always make sense of this technology, we can always stay in control of it, and I don't think that would be accurate.
And to build on that, when you think of our lives, when the news stories that we are getting is controlled by AI, the AI is deciding what is in your news streams. When the AI is in government, when AI is in the shopping, in the marketing that you receive, in the Facebook ads that you receive, if you actually clock just how much AI is out there, making decisions on your behalf, the sat-nav, whatever it is, you will realize just how much agency has been transferred across from human to the AI. And we want AIDA very much to embody that.
We've got so many questions, but I'm just going to take two more, and then we'll have a 5-minute comfort break before moving to Michael. So beginning with Peter, and then going to Anna, and then we'll call it a day.
Hi. So initially, before attending this, I didn't really do any background information on AIDA specifically, and I didn't look it up. And upon first glance on it, it's like, oh, okay, this is a very femme-presenting robot. And you briefly I believe your presentation went into the idea that, well, you landed upon presenting her in a femme format, just kind of off the cuff with a production team and stuff like that. But to me, that's kind of interesting with an extended history of the computer as being typically feminized in different roles. Like how computers beforehand, before we really had them as they were today, was a highly feminized role. It was literally female mathematicians, to the point where I think one of the IBM workrooms was literally referred to an IBM harem at some point, because it was all female computers or computer mathematicians who were just working on highly complex computations all day. And I think that you can react to that however you want, but I'm also interested kind of in the character of AIDA as specifically a continuation of Ada Lovelace. In particular, I would say, did you talk to Lovelace's estate at some point, and what were their reactions to essentially, to a certain extent, resurrecting her to become an artist of sorts?
So I guess a couple of things in there. In terms of Ada Lovelace, we have had some contact with the estate, and that's been really positive. And in terms of what you're talking about, in terms of like the identities and kind of like the feminizing, again, I think these are all really interesting questions. Like there's something about Ada, for us, we had to make a set of decisions, and that was kind of where we felt that was like, okay, well, let's run with this. But the conversations that you're talking about, say I'd never heard of what you were talking about, the IBM things and everything, those are the kind of conversations that are fascinating to have. They're outside of particularly what we can start as I suppose we're provoking those in the project, but it's those conversations that continue on after, which are out of our ability to make full comment on, but are part of the artwork. If you get what I mean.
And finally, final question of the session, Anna.
Thanks. One thing that I think, is coming up at the core of the discussion is the idea of the relationship between the audience, their perception, and how they feel that they relate to Ada. And as we were talking about this, it really got me thinking about the concept of celebrity in general. Celebrities and artists are real people, but the way the audience experiences them is constructed, and even to the point where people in my research, like Raoul van Eyck, have called them machines with a human face. Daniel Boorstin talks about, this, and Guy Debord talk about, the celebrity commodity, and the fact that when we relate, they don't really relate back, and there's an emptiness there. And I'm wondering if maybe the real uncanny here is just this familiarity with the fact that we've had these sorts of relationships before through popular culture.
Yeah, again, I can answer that. I think that's probably a brilliant way to round off the session. There's something about kind of, a lot we've been talking about the presence of AI and kind of what that sort of actively might mean, but I think maybe you're hitting at some of what that absence of what some of these relationships, might entail. And I think there is something, obviously there's something exciting about technology, and yet there's always something really tragic about it too. And I think there is something quite sort of hollow and melancholic about our use of technology and what that means in our lives. And I think Ada can do quite a good job sometimes of reflecting that back.
Can I do a summary of some aspects I want to finish on? Ada is, as a project, developing very heavily this year. We are going to reposition the whole project for next year. It's quite a big moment for us, and we're literally spending the entire year developing it with a huge team to be able to do that. And we're about halfway through, so I've actually seen first results and all the rest of it, which is incredibly exciting. We would love to partner with different organisations, particularly on the museum side with exhibitions. So we would love Ada to actually come to Canada. And if any of you are in the audience have access to museum shows and the like, that is something we would be very encouraged and excited to be involved with. We are saying no more than yes nowadays. The inbound traffic is pretty huge, and so we have decided to try to make as public as possible of what we do want to see, so that we then really are doing that. And so museum shows is something we would particularly, and institutional shows is something we would be very interested in, including universities. So just to put that out there, that we would love to develop the project, because it is actually through those exhibitions that the project develops. And so that's really, really powerful. And so we would love to be able to develop the project in partnership with various organisations to be able to do that.
As Aidan said, they say no more than they say yes, so we're delighted that you said yes to us. So thank you so much to both of them for sharing this extraordinary project so brilliantly. Let's give them a round of applause and have a 5-minute break.